Hi, psych250 students. Welcome back to Chapter 15, Disorders of Childhood and Adolescence. And we ended the first video with a mention of the case study dealing with autism. Here's a reminder of some of the information. Autism now is seen as a spectrum disorder, ranging from mild to severe. So in other words, many people that you encounter may fall on the spectrum, but you wouldn't know it because whatever issues they may have are not really impeding their success rate too much. Others are pretty extreme cases, and it's very noticeable that the behavior is not consistent with what you would normally think a person is like. Okay, so such what? Well, lack of eye contact. I do that sometimes. Lack of emotional connection. So initially, when we saw this disorder with children, and we typically see one of the first behavioral characteristics, a lack of speech around the age of 24 months. Usually that's language explosion time. We see repetitive behaviors, for example, taking a pen or pencil and spinning it and staring at it for an hour. Most of us would take about 10 seconds and say, okay, that's enough. But they would do it for a much longer time period. When we first saw that, we just thought, okay, what's going on with this child? Why are they into their own little worlds? What has their mother done to them? Again, a lot of early theorists are males, so they, of course, would blame the mother who had more time with the child. And they started believing that refrigerator mothers were causing these children who didn't make eye contact, didn't connect with other children, did parallel play, didn't play with other kids, but just played by themselves, even though they're surrounded by other kids. Would have tantrums when there wasn't any particular order. As we learned more about the spectrum disorder, we eliminated some possibilities. For example, and this is still prevalent today, this notion that somehow if you get some vaccinations, that's going to lead to autism. The research does not support that. It was based on some faulty research that one particular doctor here in California produced. It was not replicated, but yet people still hold on to that belief. Why? They're using a correlational method. My child was diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder right after he or she got their vaccinations. They're making that connection. One thing causes the other, and we know with correlations that's not the case at all. Yeah, coincidentally, they're getting vaccinations, but that's about the time when we notice the deficits in language. So one doesn't cause the other, they're just happening around the same time, right? The diagnosis part. So let me introduce you to Temple Grandin. Here's an image of Temple Grandin, one of my former students, and I love it when former students keep in touch and send me pictures, graduation pictures, things of that. That's about the only thing I ever ask of students besides trying to do the best they can in my courses. One of my former students said, hey, I remember you mentioning Temple Grandin. She's coming to University of California, Irvine. Thought you might like to know and maybe come see her. Well, not only was I grateful for the invitation, but I definitely made it a point to go and see her. And if you get an opportunity, just check out YouTube or check out any source. Just Google in Temple Grandin and watch a video or two of her so you can see her speak. She's pretty consistent. A few clips I've seen of her, she was very much like that during her presentation. Temple has a very interesting background because she was slow in development with her language. She responded to certain materials as feeling very uncomfortable in her body and would have tantrums when certain noises would bother her. And a doctor that her mother encountered pretty much said she should probably be institutionalized. There's not much we can do for her. But her mother, moms are so great, so are dads too. Her mom recognized that her daughter had all kinds of potential because her mom would play the piano, and then later she'd hear her daughter humming the tune she had played earlier. She knew there was a lot more going on than this child who was having tantrums. Eventually, Temple spent some time with her aunt, and she was exposed to a ranch-style lifestyle, including cattle and horses, and she seemed to have an affinity towards these animals. She got through high school, and she recognized in the cattle facilities that when cattle were brought in a squeezing chute so that they could be branded and held in place so they wouldn't move while they're being branded, they seemed to calm down quite a bit. So she built her own squeezing unit, if you will, to calm herself down when she would have her tantrums. Well, of course, the high school psychologist found out about this and had it taken away, thinking it was some kind of weird, strange contraption on her part, totally misunderstanding what was going on here. Here is a bright young woman who's coming up with her own ideas of treating herself with, at that time, an unknown illness. Temple went on to go through college and then get her doctorate, and she became the foremost expert on designing cattle facilities. How was she able to do this? Well, she wasn't an architect, but she had amazing ability for details. She also had amazing ability to notice details with animals. And she noticed that cattle, when they're in these slaughter facilities, would get very upset if they saw a waving flag or if they heard a screeching motor sound. And of course, the ranchers would just use electric prods or beat them to get them to go from one point to the other. And she just thought this was cruel and unusual. So she designed circular facilities with the natural movement that they would normally do in circular motions. And it helped farmers and ranchers eliminate some of these distracting, disturbing phenomena. So if they were going to work with cattle in any form or fashion, they could do so in a humane way. Quite an amazing woman. When I went to go see her speak, I was shocked to see Temple outside talking with people before the presentation occurred. She was talking about some of the books they had for sale. And so I figured, oh, if she's out there schmoozing with the public, I'm going to go introduce myself. And so I did. And she asked me what classes I taught. And I mentioned that I mentioned her in my classes. And she seemed very personable, very likable. She typically wears this Western outfit. As a matter of fact, if you ever get a chance, there's a movie made a little bit about her life, starring the actress Claire Danes, who Temple Grandin said is really me, but a lot better looking version of me. The name of the movie is called, and the book is called Seeing in Pictures, because that's how Temple Grandin sees. She sees pictures. So if you mention a word, she'll see all kinds of images in her head. Very concrete thinker. She is not interested in any kind of romantic relationship with somebody because she said she's never seen a marriage that could serve as a role model for her to be interested in that. So her emotional connection with things, like she says, having a gold doorknob means nothing to her, right? It doesn't spark any joy, so to speak, in her life. But she connects with people and animals in a very different way, and is quite a brilliant person. She also recommends that parents with autistic kids define their skills, right? Don't just count what they're doing, what they're interested in, because you never know how kids can develop a talent, maybe employment, maybe a career. I mean, here's a woman who could have been institutionalized, but yet goes on to get her doctorate and become this amazing designer of animal facilities who happens to be on the spectrum. She also noted that there are a number of top 500, Fortune 500 heads that are probably on the spectrum, but she said she'll allow them to come forward and announce it for herself. So what is the etiology? We know that biology is also involved with this phenomena. Again, I feel so bad for those parents who were blamed for somehow being the cause of their children's inability to connect with their lives as others. You see that this happens pretty early in the development of the fetus. There's still a lot that we're trying to understand about this, right? But again, no correlation with vaccinations. But there are always going to be people, no matter what scientific information you present to them, they'll discount science, whether it's climate change, whether it's should we go back and open up the country and open up the beaches again, when people are saying, look, we're trying to save lives. Science is irrelevant in their minds. So this has been a very controversial topic, as you can imagine. Prognosis and treatment is kind of mixed. Some kids respond very well to Temple's method of binding or wrapping children up with cloth so they can have that squeezing sensation and it releases their tension. These kids, and Temple alluded to this, wanted desperately to be hugged, but yet at the same time, if they were hugged, it felt painful to them. They had a sensitivity that was built into them. So you can imagine how parents are feeling like they're failures because their own kid don't want to hug them, and yet they desperately want to be hugged. If you fall on the spectrum, we would probably say that Temple has a mild case. She's very high functioning. And there are some kids that need 24/7 care that are more profound. There's an article in this month's National Geographic that deals with parents who are trying to find situations for their kids to be employed, to live as independently as possible. And again, with mixed results. There are some parents who have actually started businesses like auto cleaning services and so forth, just to employ children on the spectrum. And I think that's just amazing and wonderful. We define ourselves by our relationships. We define ourselves by our employment, our successes, and everybody has, I think, deserves an opportunity to have success in their life. So now to the review, chapter 15. I got 2 questions. I'm glad you were paying attention. The first question, of course, you knew this was coming, is to talk about the case study of Temple Grandin, what her diagnosis was, and as well as what was my personal connection with Temple. And I was so glad to get her. I got her to autograph one of the flyers, which is in the psych lab, and I got her to autograph one of the books I've read about her. Quite an amazing woman. She asked people not to film her presentation because the filming that they're using from their phones produced a light, and that was very distracting, and that would completely throw her off in her presentation. So we respected her wishes. Second issue is sort of related, but I want you to go more in depth with some of the controversy surrounding the spectrum disorder, right? As well as some treatment issues. We're learning more things. We're seeing more success. I can't think about how many kids in the past that probably fell on the spectrum or somehow were misdiagnosed and institutionalized. Hopefully, as we progress in society, we'll find a place for everyone. I appreciate you taking the time to watch these videos. Got one more chapter to go.